Again, have several criteria. First of all, we want to see the distribution by type of organization. So we have, first of all, culture and recreation organizations. They represent the largest part of NGOs, 26%. According to the report, this is explained by the fact that such type of associations, as I already mentioned, are not completely new, but they actually existed prior to the fall of communism, and they were tolerated because they posed no threat. So now they multiplied in the 1990s. Secondly, we have the social services organizations, which represent 18%. The access to public funding for this type of activity was regulated in 1998. There was a special law for that. Only 25% of the funding for this type of NGOs came from the state budget, actually, and bureaucratic obstacles remain a key feature in Romania. A third category is the education and research associations, which represent 16% of the number of NGOs, or associations and foundations, and are most commonly organized around existing state institutions. They promote the object of activity of the respective institution, and one important aspect relates to the rapid development of higher education system and to the proliferation of public universities. Most private universities are actually organized or registered as foundations or associations. Another type of NGOs is the Environment Protection Associations, and they represent 5% and have gained a gradual importance in Romania. Now, initially, what was the most visible, Greenpeace I wanted to say, what was the most visible association preoccupied or NGO preoccupied with environment in Romania? This was the Greenpeace. But later on, other Romanian associations gained from great prominence recently, and we have the association Save the Danube and the Delta, and another one is the campaign Save Roșia Montana, so renowned and always discussed in Romania. They're always on the news because they are so active, radical, protesting, and they're consistent. This is the difference. Some NGOs are actually losing their visibility because they don't have systematic or consistent or regular activities. Not the case with these two environmental organizations. So, environment protection associations represent 5% and have gained a gradual importance. As this is said, I think we should go on to the other type, and I would like to come back to two projects of the two environmental organizations. Finally, we have the advocacy and human rights associations and foundations. They were so visible in the 1990s, but by 2005, though, they seemed relatively underrepresented. And there is a total of 1,000 something for the whole country, which is surprising because this domain of human rights protection was initially received the most attention from international donors. As I said, I would like, after discussing the 5 types, I would like to go back to these two environmental organizations and to explain why they are systematic but also radical campaign had an impact on Romanian politics and on the legislation. For instance, the association Save the Danube and the Delta was able to achieve a series of legislation revision concerning the preservation of biodiversity in the Danube Delta and also concerning the limitation of economic exploitation of fish resources. On the other hand, we have the campaign Save Roșia Montana, who managed to slow down and freeze the largest gold quarry endeavor in Romania. The latter was a significant advocacy effort and brought together different institutions and personalities. So by 2005, adding to these and there were no more than 627 environmental NGOs in the whole of Romania. This is the one sector which was never represented during communism. You had the sport, recreation activities. You have other types of associations, of course controlled by the state. But this has no prehistory in civil society development in Romania. Now, we also want to have a look at the urban-rural distribution of NGOs. In the late 1990s, 90% of NGOs were active in the urban areas, out of which 76 were located in the city counties, capitals. And this is the Romanian version of the Okay, by 2005 though, the situation was only slightly improved, and the percentage of rural-based NGOs increased to only 15%. Sandra Poland underlies this astonishing underrepresentation of associativity in rural areas, since Romania is actually a country that has the largest proportion of rural inhabitants in Europe, over 45%. Now, we have another major initiative, and that is the Foundation for the Development of Civil Society. This is a non-governmental and independent organization created by the European Commission. According to the assessment in 2003, Bucharest, the capital city of Romania, hosted the largest number of NGOs, and it was then followed by the other county capitals, what we call the regional. With respect to regional distribution, Transylvania was, by and large, the largest sector of Romanian associational life. According to Poland, the regional distribution of organizations by domain of activity shows also some interesting patterns. First of all, what do we have? In Transylvania, most numerous associations are involved in social services. Secondly, are preoccupied with sports. And thirdly, they are ranked in preoccupations for cultural and recreation activities. On the other hand, Moldova, the eastern part of Romania, also features a prevalence of social organizations followed by sports and business and professional associations. So finally, the southern part of Romania, Wallachia, is actually important for its business and professional associations, which are the most numerous. Actually, they are followed by sports, and social services come only third. Also, Transylvania features over half of all the religious NGOs in the whole country. It would be 56% and something. Also, with respect to advocacy and human rights NGOs, Transylvania again comes first, is home to fewer than half, 44 and 8%. It is followed by Wallachia, as I told you, the southern part of Romania, which features only 23%, Moldova, eastern part, and finally, Bucharest is home to 19.5% of all of them. The Secui region, with considerable Hungarian population. Well, culture and recreation organizations are surprisingly prevalent. For instance, there seems to be 5 times more culture and recreation organizations in the Secui region than there are NGOs devoted to social services, and twice as many culture and recreation NGOs than organizations involved in advocacy and human rights. With respect to regional differences in NGO revenues. Now, we should make a distinction in the case of Romania between active NGOs and non-active NGOs. How do we distinguish? How does the Ministry of Justice distinguish about the two of them? Well, based on the number of organizations which submit an annual balance sheet with respect to regional differences in NGO revenues, what do we see? There is a special type of discrepancy between regions. The cumulative earnings in 2004 and 2005 of Sandra Kolom's data set of active NGOs amounted to about 21.4 billion in Romanian currency. The organizations in the capital, Bucharest, earned the largest share of the revenues, 45.4%, while Transylvania earned almost one-third, almost as much as Moldova and Wallachia combined. The revenues of civil society organizations come from a variety of sources. And now here we have the Johns Hopkins University researchers who actually create these groupings. First of all, there are fees, which include private payments for service, membership dues, and investment income. Then we have philanthropy, which includes individual giving, foundation giving, and corporate giving. And finally, the government or public sector support, which includes grants, contracts, third-party payments, government-financed social security system, and they operate as a quasi-non-governmental organization. The report of the Foundation for the Development of Civil Society from 2010, called the Barometer of NGO Leaders, indicated that the organizations in Romania reach out to diverse sources of financing in very high proportion. Most frequently, NGOs benefit from individual sources, so you have three types of individual sources. First of all, donations from the 2% deductible income tax category. So 64 and something percent of Romanian NGOs have their sources from this individual payment, which is regularized because it is regulated. Secondly, there are also individual donations, 52%, and from membership dues, and this is the Romanian cotizația, the membership due. Okay, secondly, business companies giving is also frequent. 39% of the organizations received money, while 25% received corresponding goods instead of money. The number of NGOs that benefited from European funds is not extremely high. It is high, but it doesn't reach half of its sources. So, this is 29.5%. The number of NGOs that benefited from local or central budget represents 23.2%. The Freedom House report was mentioned earlier this morning in my predecessor's speech. And of course, Freedom House has this Nations in Transit report. It is an annual report which tries to check democratization tendencies. And we could try to check the reports on Romania, and we are mainly interested in civil society in Romania. What do we observe? With regards to funding, the major business persons give their financial support to soccer clubs and not to NGOs. So this is a preference for the business elite, to support soccer instead of other NGOs. This is due to the fact that the sponsorship legislation, this is another factor. It's not only a preference, it's another factor. Sponsorship legislation is poor, outdated, and the attempts of revising it is, of course, scarce. The EU funding creates opportunities for NGOs that act as service providers. However, as the funds are distributed to the government, of course that NGOs must be in loose partnership with the authorities in order to have access to them. Now we will briefly look at these Freedom House reports for Romania with a focus on civil society in the last years, because our data were actually from the period of 1990 up to 2005 and then later on to 2008. So we want to see the most recent developments. First of all, we have the report for 2009, which says that Romanian civil society, especially anti-corruption groups, continued to engage in meaningful campaigns in 2009. Unfortunately, political parties continued to create alternative groups intended to usurp the influence of independent civil society. You know, at some point, there was a quotation actually, this is the statement of a former Prime Minister, Romanian Prime Minister, who realized the importance of civil society in supporting political parties and their visibility. And this is why, exactly what Adrian Stase once said, let's create our own NGOs, because we need them. And the result is a persistence of economic and political pressure on civil society. We go further to another report, the one from 2010. Romanian civil society suffered from a general public cynicism and funding shortages. But nevertheless, it succeeded in making its voice heard in 2010. Several thousand NGOs were active and some are still active watchdogs on specific issues. Free media, anti-corruption, urban development, though by and large civil society lacks mass support. During 2010, trade unions brought thousands of people onto the streets and protested the severe austerity measures imposed by the government, and the environmental protection movement continued to gain momentum. This is another trend. The end of 2010 witnessed the civic sector searching for new funding opportunities following the withdrawal of most important initial donors since Romania joined the EU. Civil society in Romania, according to Freedom House, is also in 2011 enjoying a considerable degree of public trust. But despite adverse economic circumstances, it continued to face difficulties in mobilizing civic participation and local resources. So, when we mentioned certain campaigns for anti-corruption and for media freedom, we would like to mention such examples. There was such a campaign which tried to attract public awareness which addressed the causes, costs, and consequences of corruption. This was one campaign called Clean Romania, and it was, well, aiming at anti-corruption laws regarding free access to public information. The Alliance for Clean Romania was then an alliance comprising, it is a civic movement, and it comprises several associations, and they are actually visible associations and systematic. This is the Academic Society in Romania, the Freedom House Romania, the Group for University Reform, the League for the Defense of Human Rights, the Cluj branch, from where we come, and the Center for Independent Journalism. There was another project developed with the League for Human Rights Protection, which tries to boost the opening of public debates on certain issues. But the result was unfortunately modest. There were only a few debates, and most of them included the participation of some public servants, so not a huge impact. Another campaign called Don't Give Bribes was developed by Concept Foundation in partnership with Transparency International and other organizations, as you can see, Association of Cable Communication and Online Media Editors, and it was financed by a pilot program for civil society. So, in 2012, we had yet another campaign. It's called Go Free, the Association for the Support of Civil Society, and it organized a campaign called Enough, aimed at discouraging electoral bribery by stopping the attempts of political parties to fraud the voting process, and by citizen awareness with respect, vote, and with their responsibility. This is one example of such campaign, anti-corruption campaigns. And the young child says, I do not beg for your vote. Now, if you want, I would like to stop for a second and see why do you think the child is included here?
To make the audience more sensible?
To make the audience more sensible?
Somehow.
And it's the symbol of a new beginning.
It's
a symbol of a new beginning, of
a symbol of a new
the
beginning.
politics in Romania, because child and innocent and all that.
Yes, I think it's a Roma child, you see? So, if this is a Roma child, what do we actually deduce here? That Roma citizens in Romania are mostly actually prone to be bright. But that's because they have poor conditions and their living costs are higher. So this is why a Roma child was on purpose put here, so that actually we understand that bribery, electoral bribery should be discarded and dismissed, because children from the Roma community do not beg for this vote, and they don't need, because this is what it says, enough with electoral charity. Enough with electoral charity. Because you will see that the trend in Romania was that the number of NGOs always grew around election years. And that's also because some political parties and civil servants set up their own NGOs, and this is why NGOs actually became, first of all, they were given a negative connotation, but also they became a means to actually exert fraud and follow politicians' interests. So the final part of our presentation, since we are also interested in discussing the crisis, is based on the following question. How have civil society organizations in Romania been affected by the crisis? Now we have, again, a report which we trust, and, well, according to them, to such authors, Romania, from Romania to Belgium, there have been different examples of how civil society organizations have dealt with the consequences of the crisis. Which means that the socio-economic crisis triggered by the financial crisis in Europe has resulted in an increased need for civil society organizations to work hand in hand with governments to solve pressing matters, issues that have emerged. But in many countries, and Romania is an illustrated case for this, there is a political statement that has meant that interaction between civil society organizations and political actors has been left in a limbo, has been left in the lurch, while decisions about allocation of political responsibilities were more important and were made. So, in Romania, for example, where the national... Yes, there is a deadlock, first of all, because of, well, there was a deadlock most recently due to loss of institution legitimacy. There was a fierce struggle between political parties, those in opposition against the Social Democrats. So, first of all this turmoil and all this antagonism, in the end, had a huge impact on institution and on the institution legitimacy. And this is the most important cause for the deadlock. Yeah, political statement. That would be all, and I thank you for your attention.